Hello, Mac here, and today I have got the import/export DLC for GTA Online, as well as talking about my thoughts on this DLC and sort of giving a review on this DLC. So we're over 2 weeks since the import/export DLC, so pretty much this is a DLC. It's a new business DLC centered around stealing vehicles, and that's the main focus of this DLC. So I say a good start is to talk about the vehicles in this update, and the actual cars that you can buy off of Legendary Motorsport and, Benny's and stuff like that. Those are some of my favorite vehicles in the game. I feel like this DLC knocked it way out of the park with those vehicles. We got 2 supercars, the Ocelot Penetrator, as well as the Pagani Tempest. Now, I will admit, I don't own the Ocelot Penetrator. I have driven it a little bit, and it's a decent car. It's not that expensive, so it's $800,000, and it's not the best in a lot of situations. It's not that great of a supercar for performance, although it does look nice. I think it has a bit of good customization, as well as, it's decent for the price. You're not going to expect anything amazing from a vehicle that's only $800,000, especially a supercar in this day and age. However, the Pagani Tempest has quickly become one of my favorite supercars in the game. Ever since the RE7B got nerfed, I've been trying to find that new supercar that I really like, and I think the Pagani Tempest has become that. I don't like the RE7B as much anymore, and the Pagani Tempest has really just replaced that car for me. It's very good for its price. It's not the best supercar in the game, however, it's very easy to drive, and it really can compete with the other supercars, and for the price of only $1.3 million, it's very, very good. And I would recommend anybody, if you're wanting a new supercar that isn't, 3 years old at this point, that still can compete and is a good price, maybe look into the Pagani Tempest. I know not everybody has $1.3 million, but in this day and age, $1.3 million for a car like this is a very good deal. And so I love the Pagani Tempest. It looks amazing in my opinion, drives like a dream pretty much, and I love that supercar. Next up, we got a new sports car, at least sort of a new sports car, and that's the Elegy Retro Custom. Now, this is a pretty cool car. Basically, if you take your Elegy into the Benny's, and then you upgrade it for, I think, $900,000, which I think is kind of a ripoff and kind of a little bit of an extreme price point, you can get a lot of customization on here. Now, this is nice, and I do really like the Elegy, Retro Custom, and I think ever since, Benny's came out, I was always like, man, an Elegy that is custom would be amazing. And this car is very nice, and it sort of retains that amazing speed out of the Elegy, which is quite nice. It's a tad bit worse, but not by much, and it's very, very nice. However, I feel like it's kind of overpriced, and I would recommend anybody, if you're not a big fan of the look of the car, you could go much better with other sports cars, especially for the price, because that $900,000 is not your end price. Because if you're gonna get it, custom and stuff, you probably also want to customize it in Benny's, which can go upwards of $500,000 to close to $1 million, depending on your upgrades and stuff in Benny's itself. Spoilers, bumpers, and all your liveries and stuff like that. And also, I'm a tad bit disappointed that the customization, a lot of it is kind of reused from other vehicles like the Banshee 900R and especially the Sultan. And I feel like it's a tad bit disappointing that there isn't much new with the car. At least I didn't notice much, new items and stuff like that. So while it is nice, it is reusing a lot of assets from other Benny's vehicles. And then there's also a new Benny's bike in the game. However, I have not driven it. I have not even seen that much gameplay of it, so I can't really comment on it. However, a Benny's bike is kind of nice, but I feel like a lot of people are already burnt out from the biker DLC, so they don't really want new bikes and stuff like that. So I feel like since we got so saturated with the bikes from the biker DLC, this new bike, which I can't even remember the name of, to be honest, I feel like it kind of just fell by the wayside for a lot of people. And while this is nice, the actual cars and, the bikes and stuff like this, the civilian vehicles in this DLC, they're nice, and they're some of the best vehicles in the game, in my opinion, but I feel like it's kind of just a small amount, especially from, cutting stunts, and we're coming from, finance felony and stuff like that. We got so many cars in those DLCs, or at least it seemed like, and then we got kind of few here. So I feel like there's 2 reasons for that. One is the special vehicles, which we'll talk about in a little bit, as well as the DLC being locked behind this sort of timed wall. And what I mean by that is, just a few weeks ago, we got the Nero, whenever they added in all the festive surprise stuff. And just, whenever they added in the snow for the first time, we saw the Comet Retro Custom. And pretty much ever since the beginning of this year in 2016, I think since the Lowriders Custom Classics DLC, they've been sort of like drip feeding these DLCs out. And I like them on one hand, but on the other hand, it means that a lot of the content is locked until later, which kind of gives off an impression like the DLC is not actually that big, especially whenever the DLC comes out. So these cars that are in the game right now, that are set to come out later, they're kind of nice. I don't want to spoil them too much if you haven't looked, up information on them and stuff like that. However, that information is out on the internet, so if you want to go, search up on these new vehicles, you can yourself. However, they are quite nice, and I think that they actually look quite great. And we already got the Nero and the Comet Retro Custom, which are kind of nice vehicles. However, the big disappointment with this DLC is the special vehicles. So we got a lot of special vehicles in this DLC, and they're basically these sort of beefed up versions of other vehicles, and they're all Pegasus vehicles pretty much. And so we got a few, notably like the Armored Boxville and the Wastelander. We also got a Voltic with a jet engine on the back. And then we also got like a Ruiner 2000, which has homing missiles and, a parachute and like a jump on it and stuff like that. And a lot of these vehicles, they sound cool in theory, but then there's two problems with them. One is the price. And while I don't necessarily mind the price themselves, if these vehicles were amazing, whatever. Rockstar can price them whatever they want. I don't care too much. However, the price is so high for these vehicles that are not that great. They either don't have much use, like the Wastelander, which is essentially this sort of flatbed vehicle, but there's no use for it. In one of the special vehicle missions, you can actually transport a vehicle in it, but then everything else, there's no point. In free mode, there's no point for this vehicle. I mean, I guess you can have people in the back, but they're very exposed, and the vehicles, I don't even think that fast. And keep in mind, I have not used any of these vehicles, really, or at least that much. So, just a big disclaimer there. I haven't used these vehicles, and the reason for that is they're not that great, and I just don't care about them much. And then there's also other vehicles, like the Armored Boxville, which can go down in like one hit of an RPG. One explosion takes this thing down. So what is exactly armored about it? And then you have the jet engine Voltic, which is kind of nice. It has like this sort of boost function on it. But really, the Voltic's not that great of a car. I mean, it's just decent. And then also, just the jet engine doesn't give that much to it. I mean, it's a fun vehicle every now and again, but not that big of a deal. There's also like the Blazer Aqua, which is nice, but for $1 million, that's very overpriced. Like, how often do you really go over water in this game anyways? So that's kind of useless, as well as the Technical Aqua. And the Technical Aqua is basically a technical that can go in water, but the original Technical was also overpriced. It was like almost $1 million for a vehicle that can only seat 3 people, goes down in one hit of an explosion. Well, the gun's amazing, really, but you're so exposed on the back that you can go down just like that, and you die. And then there's other vehicles, like the Ruiner 2000, which the Ruiner 2000 is very cool, but it's also very overpriced. And it's kind of like, I think it's $5.7 million, which, keep in mind that all of these vehicles, if you do the special vehicle missions for them, the price does go down a little bit. But still, even at its discounted price, it's still very overpriced. Essentially, it's a Ruiner, but with missiles on them, which is quite nice. I think it also has a machine gun. However, the missiles are homing missiles, but you only get 8 of them. And then whenever you run out, I think you have to take it back to your warehouse to get another one to resupply. And then the thing doesn't have much armor. And people, before the DLC came out, were always calling it like the Hydra Killer. But really, the best Hydra killer, if you want to take out some guy in a Hydra, the best way to do that is to call your own Hydra. This vehicle is not that great. One, because it's very easy to take out if you are in a Hydra. If you're a decent pilot, you can take it out very easily. Also, I don't think it has any armor on it, whereas the Hydra, it can most of the time withstand at least one rocket. Sometimes it doesn't, but most of the time it will, but it will lose like a wing or like the back wings and stuff like that. And you essentially, you're going to have to jump out of the vehicle, but you're still not dead at least. Also, the Hydra can fly, which the Ruiner can kind of glide, but it can't really fly. really that well. And then also the fact that the Hydra's cheaper. You know, at the highest price for the Roner 2000, the Hydra is half that price. So it doesn't make much sense to me why they add in these vehicles, and then I feel like they were designing these vehicles, and then they wanted to balance them. But then it's like, what's the point of balancing these vehicles and having them weaker than other vehicles that are already in the game? The Hydra already exists, and none of these vehicles they all have these weird problems with them. Even the, I forgot to mention the ramp vehicles, the ramp buggy, and there's also the Phantom Wedge. Both of these, they are fun, and essentially these vehicles are sort of ramps. So if you drive into oncoming traffic, the vehicles will just go flying away, which is quite nice until you realize the fact that you can hit, like, I think 30 or 40 vehicles, and then it just stops working. That's it. So it doesn't make much sense. Like, why were they trying to balance these vehicles against vehicles that are already in the game? You know, and the vehicles that are already in the game are much better. And I wouldn't mind if they wanted to make these vehicles worse if they weren't much more expensive than other vehicles that are already in the game that do this job much better. Take the Armored Boxville, for example. The Armored Boxville doesn't have really any armor at all, but it costs like $2.2 million, I believe. And then you take a look at the Armored Insurgent, the Insurgent pickup. I think the Insurgent pickup holds more people. It also has more armor. It can withstand like 5 or 6 RPGs most of the time. I believe it's also faster, and also it's smaller, so it can go into, better areas and stuff like that. So I don't understand it. Like, I feel like these vehicles, if they wanted to add in, an Armored Boxville and make it worse than the Insurgent, sure, you can do that. But don't make it more expensive than the vehicle that's already in the game that's better. Maybe make the Armored Boxville $700,000 or $800,000. Make the Ruiner 2000 less money, because anybody will just buy a Hydra if they want to go around, killing people in free mode and like griefing other people and stuff like that. So I don't understand what they were thinking with these special vehicles, and they're just a huge disappointment because they spent a lot of time into these, and I feel like a lot of them just go wasted because they're either too expensive for what you get, and they're just not that good. At least in my opinion. You may disagree, you may like, say the Rocket Voltic. I mean, it is a bit of fun, but the actual practicality of the vehicle is not that great. So next up is the clothing on this DLC, and it's decent. It's nothing too special in my opinion. Some of the masks are quite cool, but the other stuff, I mean, it's decent. It's nothing too special. I feel like we've seen so much clothing in these DLCs that, nothing really wows me anymore with the clothing, but it's not too bad, to be honest. And then there's also no new weapons in this DLC, which I guess kind of makes sense because we saw so much from the Biker DLC. We saw like 7 weapons, even though like half of them were melee weapons, so that's kind of, it's a little bit disappointing we don't get weapons, but this DLC is centered around vehicles anyways. And then finally, let's talk about the actual importing and exporting of this DLC. So this is probably my favorite part about the DLC, and it's just absolutely amazing because my biggest concern with the import and exporting is that it was going to get repetitive. And that's my problem with the crate business in GT Online. The stuff that came from Finance and Felony is that it just gets so repetitive. It's essentially go to your office, go, order some crates, go to that location on the map, and then you're going to get into like a Boxville or a Mule or, some vehicle like that, an armored van or whatever, and then you just bring it back to your warehouse. Rinse and repeat. And while, yes, this DLC is kind of similar, it's the same thing, it's the same concept, but the difference is that you're doing this import-export DLC in better vehicles, much faster vehicles, and much more fun vehicles, at least in my opinion. I would much rather go steal a Turismo R, or an Entity, or, an Osiris, or, some fast vehicle like that, rather than go, kill some guys and then take their armored van and then slowly drive it back to my warehouse. And I've actually already made like $4 million from the import and export and DLC, and I've actually kind of stopped at this point because of all the snow in GT Online, and I've been trying to, get some gameplay and death matches and races and stuff like that because of the snow. However, I'm sure I'll get back into it and probably make lots more money from the import and export and DLC. And so the money, while it's not the best, and I wish it could have been a little bit better, I feel like it's kind of unrealistic. Let's be honest. Nobody would want to sell a Grotti X80 Proto, which can be bought for like $2.7 million for $100,000. That doesn't make sense, right? You're selling these super high-end vehicles for like $100,000. It doesn't make sense, but at the same time, it's balanced. I guess, that's how Rockstar wants to balance it. And there are, a few annoyances like, the cooldowns and stuff like that, but whatever. I love the missions. I think they're a lot of fun. And who knows, maybe I will eventually get bored of them, but for right now, I think they're quite nice. Also, one final thing I want to say is that the music and the score for this DLC is amazing. Like, the soundtrack for pretty much all the recent DLCs have been amazing. It started with Lowriders. I love the Lowriders music. The Bikers was pretty decent as well. Not my favorite, but it was quite good. And in this one, I didn't like it at first, to be honest, but it's kind of grown on me. Once you start to listen to it, it's very amazing, and I love just the background music for this. So overall, I don't know if I'd call this the best DLC. I'd say there are a few things that are a tad bit disappointing, especially the special vehicles. I feel like they put a lot of work into that, but I feel like this is one of the better DLCs. I have had a lot of fun with this DLC, and I think it's quite good. Oh, by the way, before I end this video, I want to talk about the adversary mode. I hate it. Turf Wars is a very disappointing adversary mode in my opinion, and I mean, it's just, I don't like it. I never actually made a full review on it because it was so bad that I didn't even want to make a review on it. So, yeah, the adversary mode, it's not that great. But anyways, leave your thoughts on this in the comments. What are your thoughts on the import/export DLC for GTA Online? Do you like it? Do you not? Do you think it's too overpriced? Or do you think that it's actually very well priced for what you get? Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments. Hope you enjoy. Feedback/I'll see you guys in the next video.